What's up, everybody? Charlie Marlow here. A couple days ago on our 2-year anniversary of YouTube, I did a video asking all of you guys for your St. Louis Cardinals pertinent questions, comments, and concerns. As always, you came through big time. Thank you for that, as always. About 50 comments or questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can, so here we go. We'll start with Daryl Dixon. He asks, how is Marlow going to use Gorman and Donovan this year? How is Oli Marmol going to use Nolan Gorman and Brendan Donovan this year? Let's start with Brendan Donovan. Because the Cardinals stuck with Tommy Edman at shortstop, you got to think Brendan Donovan is going to be your everyday second baseman. But the great thing about Brendan Donovan is he can play everywhere. So if they're still going to experiment, let's say, with a Nolan Gorman every once in a while at second base, Brendan Donovan, he's going to move all over the place. There's a reason he was a Gold Glover as a rookie in that category of utility man. Remember, I looked this up. Last year, Oli Marmol used Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado a lot as DHs. He wants to take those guys off their feet. Both those guys got around 20 games at DH. I see a lot of games when Nolan Arenado is DHing, Brendan Donovan moves over, plays third base. That could be 20 games. That's significant. Same with first base. I'm not sure he'll get all of the time at first base, but let's say Paul Goldschmidt is DHing in a particular game. Remember, he's probably going to do that 20 times or so. Brendan Donovan can move over. He can play first base. I think Brendan Donovan, huge on-base percentage, remember, in his rookie year. Really, really impressive, talented player, great defensively. He's going to play every single day. Now, if that eventually turns into a Ben Zobrist type, maybe that's next year. If Mason Wynn becomes the everyday shortstop, potentially, we're talking 2024, you move Tommy Edman back over to his more natural position at second base, even though Edman's very good at shortstop. And then all of a sudden, Brendan Donovan becomes your Ben Zobrist super utility man that's playing 20, 30 games at 3 or 4 different positions. But for this year, I think you're going to see him a ton at second base and then moving all around to give guys a break when they're taking a day off or DHing. Other part of that question was Nolan Gorman, and I think that's a tougher question to answer. I'm still very high on Nolan Gorman. Remember, he was right there, average or slightly above average offensively as a rookie. Remember, he gets sent down at the end, had a big hit in the playoffs. That was his rookie year. And I believe he had, 14 homers in the big leagues, whatever it was, had a ton in AAA. I'm still very high on Nolan Gorman. However, I think now that you have the banning of the shift, I don't know if you want the Nolan Gorman type to play a ton at second base. I think he's going to get some time there. Should they probably move him in to working around at first base? Could he also be a guy like Brendan Donovan that could pinch in at first base defensively? We know he can play third base. He came in as a third baseman. It wouldn't surprise me if big picture down the road, he also gets a look at corner outfield. I just wonder long-term if Nolan Gorman is going to be with the Cardinals. The only reason I say that is because just he's so positionally blocked here with the Cardinals as a third baseman. I'm not sure he's a long-term solution at second base with the new rules banning the shift. I could totally see him as a corner outfielder down the road. I mean, if you can play third base, to me, you can play first base. Maybe some people disagree with that. But I do think Nolan Gorman's going to get a lot of opportunity at the DH position. I think you're going to see, let's just say Goldie gets 20 games. Let's say Arenado gets 20 games. Let's say Wilson Contreras gets 30 games. That's what? That's 70. Then you can do a right-left platoon with a Nolan Gorman versus righties. Juan Yepez gets some shots versus lefties. But I think, look, if Nolan Gorman hits, they're going to find a way to get him 450, 500 at-bats. I mean, this guy has 30-plus homer power in the big league. So if Nolan Gorman hits, don't worry. They're going to find a way to get him in the lineup, whether it's as a DH or just playing somewhere on the infield or, like I said, down the road. I could see him as a corner outfielder type. We'll see. All right. Moving on here. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Love your channel. This is from Sam Ticker. The biggest question for me, besides the pitching, is where do they put all the talents, because they all are going to need at-bats. And that's kind of part of the question I just answered. And I think a lot of you guys may ask a similar question. To me, here's how it starts out. You got to look at who gets the first opportunity. And again, we're always assuming health here. So let's go around the diamond. Obviously, Wilson Contreras, catcher. Nolan Arenado, third base. Tommy Edman, shortstop. Right now, Brendan Donovan, second base. Paul Goldschmidt at first base. That's very obvious. In the outfield, we're talking first opportunity is going to be Tyler O'Neill, left field. I think right now, let's just say Dylan Carlson, center field, and Lars Nootbaar in right field. We're assuming health. I'm going to give right there the way it is. Then first shot at DH, depending on the matchups. If a lefty's pitching, I'm going to roll Juan Yepez out there. And if a righty's pitching, I'm going to roll Nolan Gorman out there. And to me, those guys get the first cracks. And if they hit, they stay in the lineup. And I think there's a very good chance that a lot of those guys perform if they stay healthy. But if they don't, that's where you start to mix in the Juan Yepez's playing different positions, although he's not great defensively. That's where Nolan Gorman all of a sudden goes for more of a DH. They find him a spot defensively. And then also the big question mark, like what if those outfielders, what if one or two of them all of a sudden just aren't hitting to start the season? And Jordan Walker either tore it up in spring training or performed pretty well, but in the first month at AAA, he's just crushing the baseball. That's where all of a sudden, quickly, I think Jordan Walker is up in the big leagues. And when the Cardinals bring up Jordan Walker, they're not going to bring him up to sit on the bench. They're not going to bring him up to be a guy who platoons and gets 1 or 2 starts a week and pinch hits. No, if Jordan Walker's coming up with the Cardinals, he's playing every single day. He's going to get 145, 150 games. He's going to get 500-plus plate appearances, and they're going to give him a shot. So hopefully I answered that as best as I could. Let's see. David Gengenbacher. Biggest concern for me is our bullpen depth. We rely too much on Helsley, and if he goes down, we struggle to put teams away. It'd be nice to have another shutdown arm in the back of the pen. I agree. Cardinals really haven't addressed the bullpen at all. And when you look at some of the guys that you felt pretty good about in past years, I'm still very high on Ryan Helsley. I think what happened in the playoffs was very fluky with the finger. Although I think it's also fair to say that, look, closers like that who throw 100-plus miles an hour, first of all, they do get injured often. And I'm not talking about the finger thing at Pittsburgh, but more shoulder, elbow type issues. And he was so good last year. I think it's going to be hard for Ryan Helsley to replicate what he did in 2021. I think he'll still be really, really good, but he was just like out of this world last year. And then you look at somebody like Genesis Cabrera. Do you enter 2023 with much confidence at all about Genesis Cabrera? I don't. And I think that's one of the big weaknesses of this Cardinals team. Not just strikeouts overall. They were last in baseball in strikeouts last year. I think that's something we need to keep repeating, last in strikeouts. But also the left side of their bullpen, if Genesis Cabrera isn't really, really good, remember he wasn't towards the end, really all of last season. You're really relying on Zach Thompson to be really, really good. If I was the Cardinals, I would have went out there and got another established lefty reliever. I think that could be a hole for the Cardinals here coming up in 2023. And then just bullpen depth overall. Gio Gallegos, I'm still confident in him. I think you can never have too many, in today's game, you can never have too many of those swing relievers. And what I say by that is guys who can pitch multiple innings, but can also give you a spot start when and if we know there's going to be an injury to the starting rotation. I mean, it's going to happen. Let's be real. So that's where I think, look, when I say Drew Verhagen, or as somebody on our radio show likes to call it, Drew Verhoagie Sandwich, I understand when I bring him up, you guys are probably rolling your eyes out there. He was not good last year, but I think that type of player has a lot of value. If he can be good and give you multi-innings out of the pen and give you a spot start, there's a lot of value to guys like that. In the same breadth. Dakota Hudson. I think Dakota Hudson, if there's not an injury and he's good in spring training, I would rather have him in the major league pen than AAA as a starter. He can give you multi-innings. He can throw those bowling ball sinkers out of the bullpen. And then, again, when there's an injury, Dakota Hudson can all of a sudden step in. He's your, whatever, you want to call it, 6th, 7th starter. But I promise you, Dakota Hudson's going to start some games for the Cardinals in 2023. You know somebody's going to get hurt. There's going to be a doubleheader, whatever it is. So just guys like that. I always kind of mention Colin McHugh. Somebody like that who can be good out of the pen, give you a spot start. That's why I know some people are talking about Michael Wacha in that realm. I think at this point in his career, Michael Wacha wants to be a starter, but just somebody like that who's not really expensive, that will accept a role in the pen, but can be a valuable spot or depth starter. I think the Cardinals are, I don't want to say they're lacking there, but if you have an injury or two, all of a sudden Dakota Hudson is thrown into the fire. All of a sudden, somebody like Drew Verhagen potentially is thrown into the fire. Somebody like Jake Woodford potentially gets that opportunity. So the Cardinals have a lot of options there. I'm just not sure which one of those guys will be able to come through. I think Dakota Hudson, he could have a bounce back season, but we shall see. All right, let's see. Okay, let's see. When should we start to be concerned? This is from Caleb Panduku. How long should we wait till we start to be concerned about the lack of moves made by the organization? They seem to be okay with being mediocre in terms of pitching, and they seem like they don't want to make the moves necessary to become an actual contender. I think that's fair on both points there. When I say, look, the Cardinals always try to win. Like, I don't think it's fair to say the Cardinals don't try to win. They do. But they're so smart and conservative and risk averse that I think it's fair to say we're getting tired as a fan base and a media of, hey, let's win 90 plus games. Let's win the Central, which is, let's be real, one of the worst divisions in baseball, and see what happens in the postseason. And lately what happens is a very early exit. You have to go back to, I know 2019 they did get to the NLCS. I'm not taking that away from them. But that run from 11 to 15, when they were elite and they were making trips to the World Series, winning the World Series, all those appearances in the NLCS, it's been a while since we saw those type of consistent deep runs in the postseason from the Cardinals. And it's kind of like, hey, we're good enough. We'll see what happens. And lately, I mean, if you go back to the COVID season, you go to the one-game wild card versus the Dodgers. COVID was obviously versus Padres in the postseason. This past year, you get swept by the Phillies. You know, I just don't think the Cardinals match up very well against the elite teams in the National League. They do match up well against the Brewers, against the Cubs, but I think when you stack them against, if you just want to go National League in any particular order, Dodgers, Braves, Mets, Phillies, if you want to throw Padres in there, those types of teams, I think the Cardinals lineup stacks up very well against all those teams. I think the Cardinals have very good depth in their starting rotation. I think for many years now, it's been the type of starting rotation that you feel very good about, for the most part, over 162 games. I think what you worry about is you have a lack of aces and frontline starting pitchers once you really try to get deep into the playoffs and you're matching up against whether it's the Scherzers and Verlanders or just last year where they match up against Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, and those are games on paper, even though those games were at Busch Stadium. If you're looking at it from a betting perspective, it usually comes down to the starting pitcher. And I'll ask you this question. Are you going to bet your money on, would you rather have Zach Wheeler or Jose Quintana? And I'm not saying that these are home run bets. Some of them are close, but still, would you rather take Zach Wheeler in a playoff start? Jose Quintana. I'm taking Zach Wheeler. No disrespect to Jose Quintana. He's a good pitcher. Just got a nice deal from the Mets. How about game 2? Would you rather take Aaron Nola or Miles Mikolas? Again, no disrespect to Miles Mikolas. He's a very good pitcher, but if you're asking me in a playoff series, who do I want? it's going to be Aaron Nola. Both Wheeler and Nola, they're just better than Jose Quintana and Miles Michaelis. And now, if Jack Flaherty is able to be anything like Jack Flaherty at the end of 2019, or the beginning of 2021 when he was still pretty good, that changes the calculus if all of a sudden Jack Flaherty is a true one. But right now, if he's not, I really don't like the way the Cardinals' starting rotation matches up with other elite teams in the playoffs. I like their rotation a lot in the regular season to go out there and win 90-plus games. But we've done that a lot lately, and I think that's the complaint, the legitimate complaint from a lot of Cardinals fans is, hey, winning 90, winning the Central, first-round playoff exits, we're tired of that, and I think that's fair. So hopefully I answered that question. Yeah, I think the Cardinals, are they a contender? Sure. Are they a playoff contender? Absolutely. Are they a legitimate World Series contender? I don't think you can say that they really have been since going back to that run that ended in 2015. And you might say, oh, they did make the NLCS in 2019. That was also kind of weird. You beat the Braves, give them all the credit in the world, then you get swept by the Nationals. That series wasn't close at all. So yeah, were you in the Final Four? 100%. Were you really that close to winning the World Series championship? I don't think they were that year. Robert O'Connor says, the biggest concern for me is the starting rotation. I agree, and I've answered a couple questions on that. And strikeouts, again, they got to get guys who can punch people out, which is why, in my opinion, Jack Flaherty is the biggest question mark, and he's the guy that could really swing the Cardinals season. If he makes 30 starts and throws 160 innings, whatever it is, strikes out a bunch of guys, I really like what the Cardinals could do this season and in the playoffs. If he isn't, I just don't like the Cardinals matchups pitching-wise coming up in the playoffs. All right, here we go. Let's see. STL has 4 starting rotation spots. This is Nathan Reynolds. Open in 2024. How many of those spots will they reserve for prospects? And with the remaining spots, will they extend Michaelis, Montgomery, both or neither? And do you think they will add an ace like Bieber or Nola? I've talked about this with Shane Bieber in a previous video. I think Shane Bieber just feels like a Cardinal trade candidate. He has 2 years left. We'll see what happens there. Maybe that could be a trade deadline move coming up here midway through the season. I love Shane Bieber. Aaron Nola will be a free agent after this season. It's going to take a ton of money to sign him. Would I do that? Absolutely, I would. Good strikeout guy. Cardinals need that guy. Are they going to spend $25+ million a year on a starting pitcher? That's kind of what it takes, though, to get an ace. Now, guys like Michaelis, Montgomery will probably not take that much. I think Michaelis's deal, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I'm not going to look up, but I believe it's 4 years, $68 million. So if you're talking about an AAV around 16, 17, 18 million for Miles Michaelis coming up, I do think they extend Miles Michaelis, and that makes sense for both parties. If I'm Miles Michaelis, after I had another really good season, I want that extension right now because he's also struggled with a bit of inconsistency, but more so injury. So if I'm Miles Michaelis after a really good year and I'm in my walk year, I absolutely get that extension done, and I think that will happen during spring training. I would do the same with Jordan Montgomery. Jordan Montgomery is, now this is if Jordan Montgomery wants to sign an extension with the Cardinals. He's making, $10 million in arbitration. I don't know exactly what that number will look like for him, but probably something similar to Miles Michaelis, I would think, AAV-wise, 16, 17, 18 million for a 4-year-ish type deal. But I would do that as well. Adam Wainwright, I don't think is coming back in 2024, although I'm not ruling that out. Jack Flaherty, look, if he's not good, he's not coming back, in my opinion. If he is good, he's not coming back, in my opinion, just because he's going to hit the market, and after a really big season, I think he's going to get a huge number. Even if the Cardinals wanted to bring him back, I think he'll get a better deal. And also, it's all good. I know people say Jack Flaherty doesn't want to be here. I've never felt that way. But he might want to be on the West Coast, and there's nothing wrong with that. You get drafted by the Cardinals, you're here for a long time. If you want to pitch for the Dodgers or the Padres or the Giants or whoever, and they give you a deal once you get to free agency, that is absolutely your right. So I don't think Jack Flaherty is going to be with the Cardinals in 2024. But so what do we just do? So we got Matt's obviously coming back. Let's just say they extend Miles Michaelis. Let's say they extend Jordan Montgomery. Then you have Dakota Hudson as a possibility for 2024. I don't know if you feel great about that. You have Gordon Graceffo as a possibility. Again, you're throwing in the Jake Woodfords of the world. Maybe this is where Michael McGreevy or Connor Thomas enter the chat. But I do think the Cardinals will go after and sign one ace type pitcher. Now, if that's Nola, we'll see. But I do think the Cardinals realize they need strikeouts, they need an ace, they need a front of the rotation guy. So whether it's signing somebody like Nola or trading for somebody like Shane Bieber, I do think that's a move the Cardinals are likely to make over the next year or so. I think they realize they have a big need there in terms of frontline starting pitchers. All right. Robert Christ asks, just 2 questions, Charlie. 1, would you have pitched Helsley last year in the playoffs against Philly, knowing he already had a finger issue? And 2, who is your favorite Cardinal? It's a great question. Favorite Cardinal, I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say it's Andrew Kisner. The reason I say that is because he joins us each and every Tuesday on Hot Take Central, on 590 The Fan, and 590thefan.com. He's a great guest, so Andrew Kisner is my choice. Now, in terms of who's my favorite player to watch on the Cardinals, it's hard to go against Nolan Arenado. I really like the way Nolan Arenado plays the game. He plays the game hard. He plays the game right. He plays the game with some fire. He makes some of the greatest plays I've ever seen at the third base position. I also love the way that Paul Goldschmidt handles himself, so professional, so stoic, not a lot of hoopla. So I really appreciate that. Kind of hit the home run, head down, run the bases. But I also like a little fire. So I'll probably go Nolan Arenado there. I'm excited to see Wilson Contreras also because I think he brings a ton of passion to the game. It'll be fun to see that on the Cardinals side. So your first question, though, Robert Christ, was, would you have pitched Helsley last year in the playoffs against Philly knowing he already had a finger issue? My answer is yes, except, like we had a conversation about this on the radio too and asked Ali Marlow about this. My issue in going to Ryan Helsley for multiple innings in that game 1 of the playoffs wasn't that you hadn't done that before this season or last season. The Cardinals had done that a ton. In fact, I think the game script, the way Ali Marmol liked to win a big series was because they rested Ryan Helsley so much that you go to him potentially for multiple innings. Maybe it's 5 outs, maybe it's 2 innings in game 1 of a big series. Let's say it's a big weekend series. You can throw Helsley 2 innings on a Friday. Maybe he throws 24 pitches, whatever it is. You sit him for the Saturday game. You bring him back with the ability to throw 1 inning on Sunday. And I think that was the same script Ali Marmol was trying to follow during the playoff series against the Phillies. I think he goes to Ryan Helsley for 5 outs. He's thinking, hey, we win this game. Whatever happens in game 2, we'll see. Obviously, Helsley is rested in a game 2, but if it gets to a game 3, we're able to bring back our best reliever, Ryan Helsley, for 1 inning in the 3rd game of that series. So if Ryan Helsley would not have walked off the mound with that messed up finger in Pittsburgh, I never would have critiqued that decision. But I think going to Helsley for multiple innings was too much of an ask with the unknown of Ryan Helsley walking off the mound in Pittsburgh injured. And yeah, you can test it out, but can you really test out in an adrenaline situation in the playoffs how somebody will go out there inning 1? Remember, then you got to sit for a while. You got all the adrenaline, pumping 100 miles an hour. Then you go sit down for a while. Maybe that finger all of a sudden starts to get cold, starts to jam up. You have to go back out there for the 2nd inning. I think that was a big unknown, and I think it's definitely fair to critique Ali Marmol in the sense that that was a big ask for Ryan Helsley in his first game back since that injury. And remember, Ryan Helsley, like that inning, it happened quickly. It unraveled quickly. I think Ali Marmol should have went to the bullpen quicker because some of those previous batters also, Ryan Helsley was missing arm side high. You could tell he didn't have it there. And by the time Ali Marmol went to the bullpen in that situation, it was too late. So I think Ali Marmol did absolutely make a mistake there. But if Ryan Helsley's 100% healthy, I would absolutely have went to him for multiple innings in that first playoff game. And if it didn't work out, I don't think you can really crush Ali for it. It's the fact that he was banged up with the finger, and that was a tough ask. And I think also the need to go to Ryan Helsley for multiple innings all goes back to pulling Jose Quintana after 5 1/3 innings and 75 pitches. And that's where, even though Jose Quintana was really good last year for the Cardinals, if he's your ace or if he's your number one starter in the playoffs is usually not a guy who you roll out for 5 1/3 innings if he's shoving and feel the need to pull him that early at 75 pitches. That is not a number one starter type for me. Your number one starter in the playoffs, if he's rolling, you let him throw 108 pitches. You let him go 7 innings. You say, go out there, eat up 6 1/3, 7 innings. Let me then hand the ball off to maybe my 2 best relievers. And in Quintana going 5 1/3, that started basically kind of the train of every reliever having to give a little bit more than they probably should have in that game. And look, you're kind of breaking it down and simplifying it, maybe oversimplifying it. But if Jose Quintana can throw 10 or 11 more pitches, which, by the way, was the amount that he averaged for the Cardinals. It was about 86 pitches for the Cardinals. Then all of a sudden he gets a couple more outs. He gets through 6. Then you probably don't need to go to Ryan Helsley for multiple innings. You just have the one clean inning for Ryan Helsley, you would think, and the Cardinals probably do win that first game against the Phillies. Okay, Mark Schultz asks, did you hear that sound? I don't know if you did. That's my my dryer. My laundry's done. Mark Schultz, this is what I think about the Cardinals in 2023. They will be very good, very competitive if and only if they stay healthy. You could say that about all of the strong teams. Will the Yankees be a division champ with 95-plus wins if Aaron Judge goes down? Nope. Avoiding injuries leads to dominant performances. The Cardinals are better than the other teams in their division in the playoffs. It's always a roll of the dice. I agree with you, except I'll say this. The Cardinals are better than the other teams in their division. I think we could all agree on that for the most part, but it gets back to competing with the other elite teams in the National League, the teams you're going to match up against in the playoffs. I don't know if the Cardinals have more injury concerns than these other teams. I'd have to go like team by team, but I do think it's fair to say the Cardinals do have a lot of ifs. They don't have as much certainty. Like, I really like the Cardinals' young position players. I'm just not sure which ones are going to perform, but I think they have enough names that even if a couple of them don't, they got some good depth there. So that's where, again, if you go around the infield and the outfield, I think you have way fewer ifs on the infield. But it's also fair to say the outfield is a total just if party for the Cardinals for different reasons. Start with Tyler O'Neill. If Tyler O'Neill can stay healthy. Go back to Dylan Carlson. If Dylan Carlson can stay healthy and be consistent offensively and basically kind of reach that potential that we all think that Dylan Carlson can reach. Even somebody like Lars Nootbaar, who I'm very high on, it's if Lars Nootbaar can put it together for a whole season, which I think is fair. Lars Nootbaar, remember, was really, really good in the second half of the season. One of the best players in baseball for a month or so. One of the best Cardinals by far. Remember, this guy's leading off for the Cardinals in the playoffs, taking some of the best ABs in the playoffs, getting base hits, drawing walks. This man was batting leadoff for the Cardinals in the most important games of the season, but he was also hitting about 100 earlier in the year. So for Lars Nootbaar, it's if he can put it together for a full season. For Juan Yepez, it's if he can do it for a full season in the big leagues. We saw it for about half a year's worth for Juan Yepez in stretches, hitting some home runs. Can you be a legit DH platoon player and hit in the big leagues consistently? That's an if. Nolan Gorman, can you hit consistently? Can you walk enough, make enough contact to stay in the lineup and have a spot defensively to get those 450 plus plate appearances to run into 25, 30 home runs. There's some ifs there. Jordan Walker, if in terms of in spring training, can he hit enough to come up on the big club? But I think, again, when you mention all those guys, I mentioned about 5 guys, and I would be pretty confident that 3 of them do come through. And whoever the 4th guy is, you know, 1 or 2 of those guys is going to underperform. 1 or 2 of those guys is probably going to overperform. You'll see an injury there, here and there, but I think the Cardinals have enough depth in talented position players, outfielders, DH types that they'll be fine there. I'm not worried at all about the Cardinals offensively. And I've said this a million times. I'm worried about the Cardinals starting pitching. I'm worried about the Cardinals striking batters out. I'm worried about the Cardinals left-handed relief. And I'm worried about the Cardinals. I'm not even worried about them in the regular season. I'm worried about them when they get to the playoffs and face these good teams. I just don't think their starting pitching matches up. All right, K24 Skin. Main concern for the 2023 Cardinals should be the health of their pitchers, as in my honest opinion, it will make or break their season. I mean, you've got the big, which Jack Flaherty will we get question, and then there's Adam Wainwright's dead arm issue. That's another good point. I haven't really brought that up. Adam Wainwright, can he be the Adam Wainwright of the first 5 months and not the final month? So Adam Wainwright's dead arm issue that could come back at any time this season, not to mention Matz and Michaelis being there for a full 162. Yeah, again, Matz was banged up. That's where you get back to all these ifs. The starting rotation has some ifs as well, and that's where I don't have a lot of ifs on the infield. I mentioned the ifs in the outfield. There are certainly a ton of ifs in the starting rotation, and that's where, look, if you just have a couple injuries, I do think the Cardinals go from the favorite in the NL Central to all of a sudden a second-place team in the Central. Because when you go through the rotation, and I understand a lot of teams have these same health concerns, but let's just start with who should be your one. Jack Flaherty has not proven to be an ace pitcher since that end of 2019 and for about, 10, 12 starts in 2021. That is an if. Go to Miles Michaelis. Can Miles Michaelis have back-to-back really strong, healthy seasons? I think it's fair to say that's an if. Adam Wainwright, can he be the Adam Wainwright of the first 5 months of the season and not the final month? I think he will be. I think he'll figure it out. But also, you're depending on a 41-year-old pitcher. It's fair to say that's an if. Jordan Montgomery, along with Miles Michaelis, those might be the 2 guys that you feel the most confidence in terms of just being healthy and giving you 30 starts. So can Jordan Montgomery put a really nice season together? Remember, he's in his walk year. A lot of incentive to pitch really well for Jordan Montgomery. And then another big if with Steven Matz. I liked the Steven Matz signing. I think it's very solid at that number. Look, Steven Matz getting 4 years, $44 million the year before all of the craziness last year. He probably gets a lot more money this past offseason if he was coming off the good year he had, because starting pitchers are really getting paid. But Steven Matz has to stay healthy, has to go out there and make 30-plus starts or dang close to it. That's where it's fair to say, look, just as I'm kind of doing this in my head and answering these questions, lots of ifs in the starting rotation, lots of ifs in the outfield. So those are very fair questions. Ryan Branham asks, who do you predict they end up trading, either at the deadline or possibly sooner? With the outfield already having Carlson, O'Neill, Nootbaar, they have Burleson. Burleson's another guy I have not mentioned that I'm still high on. And I should have mentioned Alec Burleson as somebody in there in the mix for outfield and DH and all that. So they have Burleson on the sideline. Walker is here at some point. If not, out of spring, then one of those guys are moved to a bench platoon role. Yepez Gorman at DH, there's a logjam. All those guys are very talented. Just a matter of who can prove they belong. We know Walker is a certainty barring injury. Yeah, and that's where I did forget to mention Alec Burleson. That's where if you mention all the switch hitters and the lefties, the Cardinals have 6 guys that can hit from the left side. When you go switch hitters, Tommy Edman, Dylan Carlson. Then you go pure lefty hitters, and you talk about Gorman, Donovan, Lars Nootbaar, and Alec Burleson. The fact that you have 6 guys who can swing from the left side, that's pretty good. But in terms of the question Ryan Branham asked, who do you predict they end up trading? I've thought all along their two biggest trade chips were Tyler O'Neill, and this is more of an off-season question, but now we're basically into the season. I still think Tyler O'Neill has good trade value because he has 2 years of control left, and I thought that Jack Flaherty had good trade value as well to a contender. Now, at this point, I don't think it's going to happen, but look, if you were trying to trade Jack Flaherty to a contender, a team that's ready to win in 2023 for potentially a pitcher coming back that had more control. And again, this is where I kind of threw that out there with the Shane Bieber deal. If the Indians, or the Guardians, excuse me, don't think they're going to re-sign Shane Bieber, which I don't think they will, maybe they move that salary. They get a good pitcher like Jack Flaherty, who has 1 year left, who's only making about $5 million. Now, obviously, in that type of trade, the Cardinals would have to add tons of prospect capital. But look, I don't think the Jack Flaherty trade is going to happen now. The only way it would happen is if at trade deadline the Cardinals are not a contending team. And I don't see that happening. So I think Jack Flaherty pitches for the Cardinals all of 2023. I do think it's his final season with the Cardinals. And that's where, look, Tyler O'Neill's a trade chip. But again, if he comes out, if he hits anywhere like he did in 2021 when he finished 8th in the MVP, why are you going to trade that guy? Why would you trade Tyler O'Neill if he's on pace for 30 home runs and an OPS pushing 900, whatever it was? Remember, this is a Gold Glover, super good athlete. So to me, that's where the guys who are more trade candidates, I look at Alec Burleson just because he's unproven, and the Cardinals, in my opinion, think more highly of other guys. So Alec Burleson, I think, is probably a good trade candidate. I would throw Nolan Gorman in there, not because I'm not high on Nolan Gorman, not because the Cardinals aren't, but I think just positionally he's blocked, and you have Arenado at third base. I don't know if the Cardinals love what he's doing defensively. Does he truly have a position? We'll see how many at-bats he can get. But look, the fact that from all reports, other teams wanted Lars Nootbaar. Other teams wanted Brendan Donovan. So I think the Cardinals are going to hold on to those guys. You wonder with Dylan Carlson. You just kind of always hear his name rumored for trades. You wonder if Dylan Carlson is a guy that the Cardinals would move on from if he wasn't good this season. But look, the Cardinals were so high on Dylan Carlson, I think they're going to give him at least another season to see what he can do out there. And it wouldn't surprise me if Dylan Carlson is really, really good in 2023. And you see a guy who finishes the season with an OPS plus probably around what Lars Nootbaar ended with last year, which I believe was about 126. Would not surprise me at all if Dylan Carlson puts up that type of season when healthy. So that's why, to me, Alec Burleson, good trade candidate. Nolan Gorman, if he's blocked positionally, which I think he is. And then also Juan Yepez. I think Juan Yepez is going to be a really nice big league hitter, but is it really that hard to replace, let's be honest, a DH type right-handed power, the right-handed power bat, not as coveted as the left-handed power bat, doesn't really have a position, is probably more of a DH. I could see Juan Yepez as a guy also who's potentially traded. Not necessarily this year, maybe trade deadline, maybe next year. Who knows? All right, Colby Sports. Colby's my guy. Always supporting, always commenting. Colby, I appreciate that. Cardinals didn't do enough. Yes, it's great getting a huge upgrade at catcher, but what about the rotation? Bullpen, another big bat. Yes, so they really improved at catcher. Remember, the last couple of years, Cardinals are essentially the last in baseball, the worst in baseball offensively at the catching position. Huge upgrade to get Wilson Contreras. Rotation, we've talked about that. Bullpen, we've talked about that. I think especially from the left side, they need a big strikeout lefty that you feel good about in the playoffs again, coming in to hopefully neutralize somebody like a Bryce Harper from the left side for a team like the Phillies. Maybe you match up with a Freddie Freeman, a big lefty to try to punch out all these great left-handed bats that you're going to face in the postseason. Another big bat. A lot of people talk about that. I was just kind of never on that train. I think the Cardinals' offense is really, really underrated. I think they have a ton of options. Remember, this offense was about third place or so, or third best in the National League in some of the most important categories like an OPS, like just runs scored. I think the Cardinals offense is really underrated because we focus too much on, hey, last month of the year, Goldie struggled. This team in the playoffs, they got neutralized by Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola. That can happen in a very small sample size. 2-game series in the playoffs against absolute aces. But overall, I'm very high on the Cardinals offense, on their position players. They have a lot of options, a lot of depth. They have some young guys. They have some veterans. You have that middle of the order, just absolute presence in Goldie, Arenado, Wilson Contreras. You got a bunch of lefties. You got a couple switch hitters. What they need to figure out is who's your leadoff guy. Can Lars Nootbaar be your leadoff guy? Can Dylan Carlson potentially be your two-hitter? Then all of a sudden you're thinking maybe Tyler O'Neill with 30 homer pop. Is he hitting fifth? Is he hitting sixth in this lineup? This lineup could be really, really good. Donnie Klein asks, what are the odds of the Cardinals making a big trade before the season begins? At this point, I don't think that is a great possibility at all, unless there is a big-time injury early on in spring training. Remember, we have World Baseball Classic too. I think right now the Cardinals are standing pat for the most part. I don't think there will be a big trade. I would say the only way they make a substantial move is if one of their really prominent starting pitchers gets injured early in spring training. But remember, that happened last year. Remember what happened last year? You lost Flaherty early. You lost Alex Reyes early. I mean, that was a huge hit to your rotation and just overall pitching depth. And did the Cardinals make a move in spring training? Look, the last couple years, they have essentially said, whatever innings crunch we hit from a starting rotation standpoint, we're going to address that at the trade deadline. And I think the Cardinals will do the same if they have that same problem this year. A couple years ago, they went out there, they got Wade LeBlanc at first, then they go and get Jay Happ, they go get John Lester. Those guys were way better than anybody expected. And then this past year, they even did an upgrade on that. They hit that same innings crunch. Some of these pitchers were banged up. Jack Flaherty, Steven Matz. They go out there, they really upgrade the rotation. They trade for Jose Quintana. They trade for Jordan Montgomery. And all of a sudden, they take care of that innings crunch, have a really solid starting rotation towards the end of the season. But then obviously didn't work out in the playoffs. All right, we're pushing past 40 minutes. I still have a lot of questions to answer. So I'll tell you what, I may do another video answering the rest of your questions, but I think 40 or so minutes is good. Also, I forgot to plug my laptop in. I'm down to 9%, so I didn't want to get up and move and plug my laptop in. So I can't guarantee it. We're going to do tons of videos, obviously, but I may do another video answering more of your questions. But I think 40, 45 minutes is good. And you know what? A lot of these questions were great, and a lot of them were similar because I think you guys are smart and you have similar concerns for the Cardinals coming up. And just wrapping it up, for me, those concerns are starting rotation. You don't have an ace. You need one or two aces nowadays, in my opinion, to go deep in the playoffs. You need strikeouts, and you need another dog, another dude from the left side in the bullpen. Other than that, I'm pretty high. When I say other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? Yeah, because it's not easy to get one or two aces, to trade for that guy, to sign that guy who's gonna cost $25 million plus, which is why you need to grow those guys from your own farm system, which is why Jack Flaherty is so important, which is why maybe the Cardinals are so gun-shy trying to make a trade, because they moved Sandy Alcantara in a trade. They moved Zach Gallen in a trade. And those two losses, Gallen and Alcantara specifically, man, couldn't they use those guys right now? And that's why, for all the talkings of a big trade, go back. Even though Marcell Ozuna was a bat they really, really needed back then, for a couple years, you gave up an absolute stud in Sandy Alcantara and another really, really good frontline number 2 type starting pitcher in Zach Gallen. So John Mozeliak does not want to do that again. All right, I will shut up. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for commenting. 2 years on this YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. I'm going to do more on-camera videos for baseball season. Once again, please comment, like, subscribe. I love you all, and hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Let's go Cardinals. We're going to do it up on this channel. We're going to have so much baseball content. It's going to be crazy. We're going to have contributors down at spring training with interviews, with video of guys throwing bullpens and in the cage. It's going to be fantastic. All right. Peace.